Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21 Hats podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Feldman. This week, Stephanie Stuckey tells Paul Downs and Jay Goltz about seeking the guidance and perspective that a board of directors could bring to Stuckey's. But does a business have to be a certain size to warrant having a board? How do you recruit board members? How should they be compensated? And is a peer group like Vistage a better alternative? Plus, uncovering a $140,000 cybercrime? Coping with the nightmare of shipping furniture? And Jay tells us why, if you listen to either the artists or the accountants in your business, you're likely to go broke. Even in good times, owning and running a business can be a lonely pursuit. Our hope is that these weekly conversations will, if nothing else, let owners know they are not alone in facing challenges. Same thing with our daily newsletter, the 21 Hats Morning Report, which highlights the most important news of the day for business owners, which you can subscribe to at 21hats.com, where you can also find transcripts of our podcast episodes and lots of other articles and interviews. This week's lineup features Paul Downs, who is founder and CEO of Paul Downs Cabinet Makers, which is based outside of Philadelphia and makes custom conference tables. Jay Goltz, whose companies in Chicago include a picture frame business, artist frame service, and a home furnishing store, Jason Home. And Stephanie Stuckey, who is CEO of Stuckey's, the snack and road stop business best known for its pecan log rolls. The episode is titled, Should Small Businesses Have Boards? Before we get started, one of the recurring themes of this podcast is that marketing is hard for smaller businesses. One reason it's hard is that we are all besieged by self-appointed digital marketing gurus who overwhelm us with outlandish promises. On the other hand, there's Steve Krull, co-founder of Be Found Online. A loyal listener to the 21 Hats podcast, Steve understands the business owners who listen to this podcast because he is one. He knows his stuff, but he's also a real person who you can have a real conversation with. And if you tell him I sent you, you can get a free consultation with Steve himself. Just shoot him an email at steve@befoundonline.com to schedule your talk. That's steve@befoundonline.com. Now on to the show. Welcome, Jay, Paul, and Stephanie. Thanks for joining me today. We haven't spoken to you in a few weeks, Paul. How has it been going?
Well, I had a little surprise on Monday, sitting in my office, and I get a phone call from a bank in Texas. Very nice lady on the phone who tells me that she thinks that my company is being used for PPP fraud. And she's the fraud reduction officer. And she's watching her client's account get emptied bit by bit by scammers. The client's an elderly lady. And she has just seen 2 payments come in this morning, ACH deposits, that have my name on them. One's for $118,000 and the other one's for $22,500. And she thought she would just pick up the phone and see whether I knew anything about this. And we went back and forth about the PPP thing. And since I've already gotten 2 loans, I thought that was unlikely. But she told me the name of the company she thought was the fraudsters who had initiated the transactions, and said the name of them, and I was like, uh-oh, that's one of my big clients. And then I double-checked the amount she gave me against payments we'd been expecting, and these were 2 invoices we'd sent to this client a couple of weeks ago. And so clearly these payments had been diverted into an old lady's account in Texas somewhere. We looked into it further, and the payments had never passed through our hands. These are ACH deposits, so there's information in the payment ticket about the initiating bank and the target bank. And the initiating bank is my client's bank, the target bank is Texas. This stuff never got to us, so it didn't look like we were the source of the fraud. And long story short, $140,000, now what do I do? So I called the owner of the client company that should have been paying us and told her all about it, and she kind of blew me off. She didn't want to hear it. She was sure that it was us. She didn't even seem to understand that we got paid by ACH, and she talked about having cut us a check already, and so that was bad. one of the payments, the bank officer in Texas was able to reverse. The other one had landed in the old lady's account, and she'd already cut a cashier's check to cash for $52,000 and given it to somebody. And so apparently you cannot reverse a partial ACH payment, so that money is more or less gone. And now I'm wondering how to get the owner of this company who was supposed to be paying me to own up to the fact that her accounting department is breached and that she still owes me money. So that's how my week's been going.
That's quite a story.
Wow.
So you have no idea what's happening with the old woman's account?
Well, it's fairly likely that somebody compromised my client's email account somewhere and was monitoring invoices going in, and then made a request, probably spoofing one of our emails, to change the routing number of the outgoing payment to this Texas account. So I would guess that the scammers that are working the old lady are connected to other scammers so that they were able to identify particular payments and say, oh, please send them this place instead of that place. The whole thing violates about 10 million protocols about how you're supposed to deal with these things. And we've recently been going through a sustained effort on our end to upgrade our cybersecurity protocols because we got notice from the Department of Defense last fall that every company that wants to get a federal contract is going to have to really pass a pretty strict set of tests about how they're prepared to deal with this kind of thing. And as a matter of fact, we just got awarded a large contract from an extremely high-level government buyer.
Who was that, Paul?
I can't say. Sorry.
We won't tell anybody.
Yeah, no. Sorry.
Nice try, Lauren.
But a big part of the qualification process was this examination of our cybersecurity procedures. But it just shows how much of this kind of fraud there is going on. I had a very interesting conversation with the fraud officer at the Texas bank, and she says she sees 3 or 4 of these every day.
Do you have any sense of where the legal liability lies on this? What should happen?
Well, the question is, where did the money get stolen? And the Texas bank lady sent me an article that covered recent court cases for these scenarios. And it seems to come down to who had possession of the money when it was sent to the wrong place. But it's not entirely cut and dried. If somebody had hacked our email and sent a request from us to make this change in the target bank, I think that my client would have a much stronger case. But we've been unable to identify anything that looked like that. And our protocol is that if we ever got a request for someone to change a long-established banking relationship, and we would, of course, make a phone call and follow up and get a second verification. And it doesn't appear that they did this because we haven't, if they'd said, hey, do you want us to send your money to the place we were using or to an old lady in Texas? We probably would have said, I think that we'd rather have it just the way it was. So there you go. I don't really know how this is going to play out.
Do you have any idea what you could do differently to make sure this doesn't happen again?
I think it's harder to do this kind of thing with a good old paper check, although someone could steal it in the mail.
Except if you use positive pay, which I have for years, they can't cash the check because every time we do a pay run, we do this positive pay, and it tells the bank, here's all the checks we sent out, here's they're going to, here's how much they are, so somebody can't go ahead and swipe the check. I don't know how you do that electronically.
Well, I just talked to the cybersecurity firm I've engaged about this, and it is a real problem when people email around ACH information. There's always a chance it gets compromised, and we include that information on invoices we send out in the text of a PDF because we want our clients to be able to pay us. And a lot of the clients are sort of one and done transactions where we just want them to send the money. And we're always happy to get money by ACH because then I don't have to pay a credit card fee on it, 2.5%, 3%. And I'm also always happy to get paper checks. Same reason. It saves me a lot of money. But I've been told that there really isn't a good way to secure ACH information that's passing via email, and that the only thing you could do is to always make sure that you're verifying.
Paul, can't you implement a password-protected system to open those PDFs? And having said that, we use ACH PDF forms routinely at Stuckey's. And so I'm taking notes as you're talking about what we need to be doing to make sure this doesn't happen to us.
I suppose you could. I don't know. This is the first time it's ever happened to me.
That's what our bank does. When we send any information to our banks via PDF, they give, we have one main bank that we work with, and we have to give them a code that's texted to me before I can access any documents that contain bank account numbers.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, we should do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. I just learned something.
What pretense was the woman taking the money out in a cashier's check for?
Oh, who knows? She's apparently, I know very little about her other than the fraud expert told me that she was elderly and that the scammers had convinced her that she was in a romantic relationship, and God only knows. It's just the usual ugly human frailty at work. So,
Paul, if you can't get your client to work with you on this, what's the next step? I mean, do you have to sue them?
I could, but I've worked years to get the kind of relationship with a furniture dealer like this. And we've had a nice ongoing relationship for the last couple of years. And we have a lot of upcoming projects with different clients coming through her. So if I pull that, it's shooting her and my own self at the same time. It's not going to be good. I'm just hoping that she'll own up to that she actually has a problem and deal with it.
It's possible maybe her insurance will cover this.
It's possible. Have you ever tried to get cyber insurance?
I think I have it.
I applied a couple of years ago, and before they would even sell me a policy, they gave me a list of requirements that at the time I looked at it and I was like, hell no, and didn't do it. I've since changed my mind about that because of these Department of Defense requirements that we were given, which are even more onerous.
I'm not even sure it goes under the category of cyber insurance. She was stolen from, basically. And, so that's an interesting question, whether her insurance company is going to step up. She was stolen from. It's like someone came in to her cash register and took the money out.
It's not like someone came into the cash register.
Why?
It's like someone persuaded one of her employees to empty the cash register and throw it out the window. And that's the difference. The cyber insurance was asking me when I applied, what policies do I have in place to train my own people, to monitor what they're up to, and to respond if there seems to be a problem? And so it's not exactly like getting robbed by a stranger.
Paul, if you had cyber insurance, do you think it would cover you in this instance?
Possibly.
Yeah, I have a hard time believing that, since he had absolutely nothing to do with this. They took their money and sent it to the wrong person. I can't imagine that if he had a policy that they would say, okay, let's pay you for that. I mean,
yeah, it seems like that would be a pretty open and shut court case if you sued them for non-payment. I understand why you don't want to do that, but
yeah.
Okay, well, we'll be hanging on for the next episode of this drama.
Jay, have you ever had anything like this at all?
Well, 25 years ago, I had a scammer come in and work in the my payables department. But, he did the old school. He took a check off the bottom of the pile and wrote it to a phony account that he had set up. And back in the day, it was completely not my problem. The bank came up with the money because this is what people don't understand. You could write Mickey Mouse on your checks, and that check's going through. They're not checking signatures. They get nailed every day for phony signatures, and but that was eons ago. That was before September 11th, which changed things dramatically. That was before this whole positive pay thing. So they couldn't really do that same thing today. But apparently the crooks are finding new ways of stealing money. So something to look out for.
Are you going to check and see if you have cyber insurance for sure, Jay?
First, I'm going to find out what cyber insurance is, and then I'm going to see if I have it. And then I'm going to see how much I'm paying for it.
When I was at the city of Atlanta as head of sustainability, we had a major cyber attack on the city. And I learned a lot of lessons from that I've taken over to Stuckey's with me. And part of it was that they did intense training of all the employees on how to recognize phish or spam emails. And our whole team at Stuckey's is very vigilant about reviewing emails and making sure they're accurate and they're legit. But having said that, you really have to do your research, because the other week I got an email that upon first blush appeared to be a spam. It was from a foreign country, which often is a trigger, but you don't want to close yourself off to opportunities. And this turned out to be a legit business. It's a Mexican company that's right on the border with Texas, and they want to buy a bunch of our products to sell in their stores. And it's a major chain that could be a very big account for us. And they've got a distribution center in Laredo, Texas. So we can handle the distribution pretty easily, and we're working through the details. So it's a challenge for small businesses to make sure that you're really being vigilant, but at the same time, not closing yourself off to opportunities.
How would you like to be doing business in Nigeria now? That anyone you call from, yeah, right, sure.
Well, I've done business in Nigeria.
There you go.
I mean, we've got more tables in Nigeria than Korea. My old partner, a guy from New Jersey, actually spent 15 years in Nigeria in the 80s and 90s doing business. And so he knew what the deal was with Nigerian business. And the thing is that everybody in Nigeria knows that they want to buy stuff, and they have this problem. And so, first of all, you have to know who you're dealing with. Like just an email over the transom, forget it. But in my case, we had some jobs that were brought to me by my partner, and he knew the other guys. But even those guys who he'd done business with for years, he said the rule is you get all the payment up front. And if you don't do that and you ship the thing, then they're just like, oh, you're an idiot. Too bad. And that's just how it goes.
All right. Next topic. Stephanie, I understand you're interested in talking about the best way to find board members and retain board members. Tell us about that. What are you thinking?
Well, we're building a board because we're rebuilding the company, and we just merged actually 5 companies into one. We've got to deal with the culture, which we talked about in an earlier podcast, and we need to build a board. And so what we've had was a board that we purely put on paper when we did the initial merger to give us time to get our teams together and start looking at where we have gaps in skill sets. And now we are starting to thoughtfully reach out, and we've added a couple of board members, but we're looking for more. And certainly a consideration is making sure we have diversity of race and gender, ethnicity. We want to be mindful that we are representing the diversity of our customers and our other business partners. So it's a process. We did get one board member that I recommended, who I'm so delighted he said yes. He's in marketing. His name's Ted Wright. He's written a book called Fizz, and his company is called Fizz Marketing. And he's actually teaching me a lot about what you want in a board member. And the first thing he said to me when I asked him if he would consider board membership, he said, well, you do know you can't just get a board member thinking that that's free labor. And I paused and I said, I can't. I said, because I'm totally counting on you to give some insights into marketing. That's the skill set we need brought to the table. And he said, yes, but you've got to know your board members are giving up their time and their energy. And so you've got to get a balance there and provide something like a what's in it for them as well, because if you want a really good board member, they're probably already in demand. And so you've got to be able to offer them a rewarding experience and be mindful of their time.
What does that mean? 20 pounds of chocolate every 3 weeks?
Right. Actually, I don't know if I'm at liberty to say. I did offer him he is getting some compensation for his board service. I don't know if I'm where I can publicly disclose that, but it's what I think is something very reasonable.
Stephanie, did you think about or look into what's typical for businesses of your size? Do you think it's common for businesses of your size to have a board?
Well, we are shooting for 10 million in sales this year. So I think that a business that size should have a board. We need guidance on how to run this company. And so I think it's really important to have some outsiders brought in who can give a different perspective. Those of us who work for the company, my partner and I, we are so embedded every day in this. To have that perspective from someone who's not working for the company, I think is really important.
Lauren, to answer your question, I've been in, 5 business groups over the years between Vistage, President's Forum, Young Presidents Organization. So I've seen about, 60 businesses up close, and I can't think of any of them that have a board. Now, you could argue, well, that's why they're in the business group maybe instead of a board, but I don't think it's a common thing that a $10 million business has a board. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I don't think that's common.
Jay, you're bigger than that. Do you have a board?
No.
Paul?
I do not have a board. I'm 4 million, I hope. But I am in Vistage, and it serves the purpose of a board. I have people who know me well, and they're not shy about telling me all the stupid things I'm doing. So,
wow. Well, might be worth further research, but Stuckey's has had a board since the 1950s. And so part of it is just how we've done business. But part of it is I think they're very useful if you get the right people.
My question, which there's no answer to, is I'll be curious to see how you find these people, who they are, and how much you're paying them to be worth their while.
What are you asking of them, Stephanie? Do you expect to meet in person once that's easier to do? How much of a time commitment is it?
So initially, we're having regular weekly meetings or bi-weekly meetings. We've actually gone every other week for the first 2 months because we're doing strategic planning. And that's a couple of hours during that time frame when we have our meetings. And it's been very productive. But after that, we're looking at quarterly meetings, probably 1 to 2 hours. Part of my background is also I've run nonprofits, and nonprofits always have boards. And so I'm used to that model. I'm very comfortable with that style of leadership. And it gives you additional capacity without bringing on additional staffing. And I think it is important to have people that don't work for the company every day to bring in their not only their viewpoints, but their networks. Like Ted has an incredible network, and he and I have been talking about some of the accounts we'd love to land, and he's got great contacts at Delta, for example. We would love to have Stuckey's pecans as a snack when you take a Delta flight. So it's advocates in your court who can be ambassadors for your brand. I think it's helpful to us, but we've only had a couple of board meetings, so maybe to be continued, and let's see how it goes.
Paul, do you think your Vistage group serves the same purpose that Stephanie is describing?
I know what purpose they serve for me, but what would be different from the Vistage group would be we have in our group a rotating host review. So there's 16 members, and every meeting, one of the companies really gets drilled down into. So that means that it's only every year and a half that they take a very, very close look at me. Whereas in Stephanie's situation, the board is drilling down every meeting. And so that's different. And the Vistage group just has recommendation power. And so when you're putting together a board, Stephanie, for this, do you intend to hand them decision-making power or recommendation power?
It's recommendation power, and that's spelled out in our bylaws. Even though we're an 80-year brand, I joke that we're an 80-year-old startup because we are really building this company in a new direction. And the addition of the manufacturing capacity and a mail order business, there's a lot of new things happening with this company, and we're moving it in a different direction. And so we're at a critical juncture where we need additional capacity and support. And so that's what a board brings to the table.
I'm concerned that you're looking for expertise. And as your marketing guy said, I don't know that one can put a board together with people with some background and expertise and think they're going to give you the same input as if you went and hired a firm to do that job.
Well, it's different, right? I mean, if you want someone to really do a specific project or a job for you, then absolutely, you're going to hire that support. A board is an advisory capacity. And so they're giving you higher level strategic advice, and they've got real skin in the game when they're on your board and they're part of your team. And it's also that external ambassador piece that I think is so critical, especially for Stuckey's, as we're trying to amplify that we're back.
I would only push back on one phrase you said. You said the board of advisors has skin in the game. No, they don't. They don't have skin in the game. Your place blows up. They're not losing a dime.
It depends on how you structure the relationship and how you structure the compensation. It certainly can be done in a way where they do indeed have skin in the game.
One of the advantages to belonging to a business group is not just that they're helping you with your business. You get to see the insides of 15 other businesses, 12 other, and that's extremely eye-opening. You can learn more from that than sometimes than having someone look at your business. You can see what things are people doing, what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong. As far as paying a board member to come, I question if they're so successful and good at what they do, they're making a lot of money, which means the next question would be, how much money do you have to pay them to be on your board to be worth their while? And that's why I'd be interested to hear what the number is settled on, because to go pay someone who's very successful, I don't know, $300 for a meeting, I would not think is going to cut it unless they're doing it just because they want to quote unquote give back or they're interested in the product, which is possible, certainly.
Well, to be continued. I don't want to disclose that amount.
Fair enough.
You could give us a sense of what you budgeted for the entire board, just so we get some kind of bottom line. But are you devoting $50,000 to board compensation, or $10,000, or $600,000? Give us a sense of it.
It's in the $20,000 range total.
As a point of comparison, my Vistage membership costs me, I think, about $18,000 a year, and so it's in the ballpark for that. And you're getting a smaller group with narrower focus on you. So pick your poison, right? And it sounds like not an unreasonable way to make sure you're getting some decent advice.
No, in theory, it sounds great. Like I said, I'll be interested to see who gets recruited and how that all works.
Okay, next topic.
Yeah, to be continued.
This comes back to you again, Stephanie. We got an interesting question that came in this week in response to last week's podcast from Jim Cobb, founder of Triad Components Group, who's kind of wondering about you and Laura being both retailers and wholesalers at the same time. He called it a fool's errand. He thinks in order to succeed, you need to pick one or the other. But Jim's a good guy, a smart guy. He qualified it at the end by saying, I know I'm not living in their world, and that while this seems simple to me, it may not be as simple as it seems. What's your reaction to that, Stephanie?
He actually raises some good points, and I'll preface my response by saying I bought Stuckey's a year and a half ago as is. So I have to deal with a company that I didn't build from scratch and changed dramatically from the company that my grandfather built because it was out of family hands for decades. So I'm putting together a strategic plan for building this company back, but it was purchased caveat emptor, right, as is. And so what I bought was a company that was doing wholesale and retail. And actually, to further complicate matters, now that we have bought a manufacturing facility, we are a manufacturer, we have a distribution center, so we're a distributor, we have wholesale clients, so we're a wholesaler, and we are a retailer through our online store. We do not own or operate any of our Stuckey's store locations, so we do not retail through the Stuckey stores. So our only B2C component is that online retail store. So having said that, this is the model largely that I came into when I bought the company. We are looking at our books and we're realizing what is really driving our profit is that wholesale component. And so that's what we're focused on. And by manufacturing, we are able to improve our margins for our wholesale customers. And we're also able to guarantee our quality. And the most important factor for us was that there's certain certifications that you need to play in the world of big box retail. It's called SQF certification. So we're able now to be a better wholesale operation because we own this manufacturing facility and we've got the quality that those big clients demand. The pushback for me on this retail piece, I think it's important for us to have an online retail store for branding and marketing. And also, it's an opportunity for us to test product. So we've got for example, there was a T-shirt that said, "Eat here and get gas." And our team said, well, that might be a little too scatological for Stuckey's. We're not sure if that will sell. And I said, you know what? Let's order 288, sell them online, see how they do. We sold out in 2 weeks. So it enables you to test market, which we couldn't have done. I mean, if you're trying to wholesale, we routinely buy 10,000 and up in quantity for the wholesale business. And so that's a pretty heavy investment.
Jay, you do both retailing and wholesaling. What do you think of the issue?
I have a little more insight on this because I talked to Jim about the email, actually, if that doesn't violate any rules of this podcast. I said, Jim, do you like to shop? And he goes, no. I go, I guess that, because the fact of the matter is, having a retail store with a brand is like the new way of doing business. It's been new for about 20 years. 40 years ago, you never went to a store with a name brand and then they also wholesale through other stores. Now, everything from Ralph Lauren to Kiehl's Skincare to Toomey Luggage, there's 50 stores out there who also sell to department stores, and it helps their Nike, and it helps getting their brand out there. His point was, he thinks it's hard to control the pricing from the discounters. I said, okay, that's a different subject. So on that side, it gets back to, can you control the pricing if you're selling wholesale as well as selling retail? And the whole fair trade thing, I don't know that you can command a wholesale customer, you must sell at our retail price.
That's why they call it a manufacturer's suggested retail price.
Exactly. So the point is, I basically am saying I couldn't disagree more with him. I think having retail and having wholesale makes perfect sense. And one feeds the other. And I don't see why you have to pick one over the other unless you realize that you're just making a lot more money on the retail. But it all depends on, if you just stick with the retail, you're going to lose a tremendous opportunity in distribution. If you just stick with the distribution and don't do the retail, you're missing the opportunity to get your brand out there and catch people who, you know how it is these days. Most people will just go on the computer and just expect that they're going to find a website called Stuckey's and they can go buy direct. I mean, that's the way most products are these days. So I think it's very much the way the world has gone, and I don't think it's a fool's errand.
We're doing a complete analysis of our web sales right now. And what we've discovered is 80% of our sales are generated from 20% of our product. So there's a lot of product that we're taking off our web. We're removing those SKUs, and we're going to focus on a small number of items that are our best sellers and really push those out. That saves us on inventory.
You got to be a little careful with that, because sometimes having a bigger selection is what gets people to come to your business. There's the accountants on one side and there's the artists on the other. And if the artists just did what they want, they do everything that feels good and you go broke. And if you did everything the accountants want, you go broke because you don't have a very cool, sexy business. And there's a balancing act there of figuring out to have enough selection to make it interesting, but not too much that you have horrendous inventory turnover. And, it's tricky. It's art and it's science.
But that's the beauty of web sales, is that you don't have to have the large quantities in order to put an item up on the web. I can get 100 dunking birds, which we put in our road trip box around Christmas time, to test whether people are still interested in nostalgic souvenirs. And we sold out almost immediately and had to re-up our order. So it's a test opportunity to see what works. But you touched on something really important with the branding, and I think people really need to realize if you have a web presence, it is only as successful as your marketing. And if you don't invest in marketing dollars to let people know to go to your website, you're not going to generate the sales that you need to justify all the costs associated with running a Shopify, or in our case, we have WooCommerce, and all the shipping costs that are involved. So it's really a lot of work to put together a website. And it took us trial and error to figure out how we price, how we factor in our labor costs, what box sizes we should be using, and how we can standardize the product that we put out there for the web. So we're getting them in the small boxes that cost us less with UPS. So all of that is a lot of work to really get your cost as fixed as possible. It's been an incredible learning experience.
Paul, obviously this is a very different world from you. You're B2B and you make custom-made furniture. But I'm curious, has there ever been an opportunity for you? Have you ever tried to set up a relationship where you were making tables and selling them to an entity that would then sell it to the end user?
Oh, years and years and years ago. But the furniture world is really bizarre in that the product is never branded. You never walk into somebody's living room and you see Bassett, all over the front of the sofa or something.
You know what? I think you conflated two words. There's certainly branding in furniture. They're not labeled. That's different. But people do know certain furniture lines.
It would be as if no shoe manufacturers ever had the swoop or the stripes or anything actually on the product. If they just talked about their brand in the advertising and in the catalog and in the store, and then as soon as you walked out, you couldn't tell whose shoes were whose, which is true for a lot of shoes. But companies that decided to put their brand on the product are in a different world.
There's no question. No question. I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying there are some furniture lines that are quite recognizable to people.
Herman Miller office chairs.
Yeah, for a good example.
Lazy Boy recliners. Now I can walk into a room and say, that's a Lazy Boy.
You would be wrong half the time because there's nothing to prevent someone from knocking off a Lazy Boy, having it built in Bangladesh and selling it for a tenth of the price. You would not be able to tell. You wouldn't be able to tell without expert examination of the interior of that thing.
Bam.
And that's one of the things about the furniture industry that's weird, is that there's thousands of producers and none of them have really been able to establish a dominant brand. The sort of the snooty design market where you recognize a particular piece because it was designed by Corbusier or whatever, that's a tiny segment of the overall
I'm
world.
sure that's true. No, that's true.
All right, I've been schooled on furniture making. I do have one point on furniture being online is the incredible costs, right? It's not like shipping a pecan log roll, shipping a sofa. Which I do. I had my sofa shipped to me from Wayfair, but it's expensive and it's a different model where you're talking. I think I'm correct that Wayfair has largely built a model of shipping online, which is different than a lot of furniture stores.
It has, but it's a nightmare, and nobody has actually solved the problem because you have, just imagine trying to wrestle a sofa into somebody's house and you receive it, and that's actually the first moment that an online buyer has put their eyes on it and sat on the thing, and then some percentage, let's say it's probably 10 to 15% of the people are going to be unhappy with it right at that moment.
Well, you have the same thing, Paul, right? You ship a table that has to be assembled.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, we deal with it a whole different way, but we can charge $100,000 for a table, so it's not at all the same thing. But it's a huge, huge problem. As soon as it has to go by truck, it's an entirely different ballgame. So if you're making something small that you can send by UPS without any trouble, great. You're in a happy world.
Since COVID started, this is one of those small side things that happened to me. I'm signing every check again. I haven't done that in 20 years. So I'm signing about 80 checks every single Friday, 80 to 100 checks. And I am taken aback as to the huge check that I'm sending to this particular company who does white glove service. They deliver this stuff. I'm sending them tens of thousands of dollars. But there are companies out there doing it and doing it okay.
They're not doing it okay. This is another thing, is that the damage rate on even white glove for something large is going to be in the 10 to 15% range. And I've never heard of a high-end residential furniture manufacturer who's really solved this problem. The better solution was to have a local furniture store receive the delivery from the factory and then act as a sort of a local agent with a local truck. And that distribution point brought that damage rate down and increased the satisfaction. But the online model has destroyed the local furniture stores. And so now it's furniture coming from the factory and going, or from the distribution center, on the back of a 53-foot truck and trying to get into a residential neighborhood and make the delivery.
Except white glove delivery, by definition, is not a 53-foot truck showing up there with a truck. I mean, there are people that are doing that stuff.
What are you delivering, Jay? Picture frames?
No, we sell sofas, we sell chairs. I own Jason Home. I mean, we sell furniture. I'm in the furniture business.
Does it come from your warehouse to, you're still a furniture store that's servicing a local area, right?
Much of it's coming from my own warehouse and our own trucks, but then we do drop ship from suppliers. And believe me, I'm not arguing with you that it's not easy, but I'm telling you, I'm writing big checks every week to this white glove company, and to some level it works, though you're absolutely right. It's not easy, and it's certainly one of the more difficult things to be doing online. And one of the issues we have in today's environment is some of these companies you see online are losing money on these things, and they just keep losing money. So one of these days, maybe they won't be around, some of them.
Customers hate paying freight costs. Our freight costs actually run about 12% of the overall cost, 12% of the costs we incur. And we find that we cannot get people to just pay that. And so what we do is we fold a large amount of it into the price of the table. So
thank Jeff Bezos for that.
Because we can do that. But we're not selling something where someone can go online and check the price of it against some other merchant. So they're giving away shipping and they're losing boatloads of money on it.
Guys, I want to be conscious of your time, but I haven't been able to get a word in here.
Lauren, you still here?
You pushed my button. That's now we're talking my world. So
apparently I did. We will come back to that, but for now, my thanks to Paul Downs, Jay Goltz, and Stephanie Stuckey as always. Thanks for sharing, everyone. Wait, don't leave yet. If you have a question or a comment that you'd like the 21 Hats owners to address, send it to me by replying to your morning report or by email at lauren@21hats.com. That's LOREN@21hats.com. Do it now before you forget. And don't be afraid to tell Jay what you really think. He can take it. And if you got something out of this conversation, help us reach more business owners. Tell a friend. Subscribe and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe to the Morning Report at 21hats.com. This episode was produced by Jess Thuberon, founder of Blank Word Productions. Okay, now you can leave. Thanks for listening, everyone.